Can you describe your life before 1993? According to material standards, I lived well. My 26 Cadillacs lined up. My parents initially forbade me from having a car in school. When I required wheels, I used their enormous Packards and other vehicles to avoid distraction. After graduating, I bought my first Cadillac with my own money. I was disciplined by my father to conquer and work. That was fine, good, great. Happy to have a lovely automobile. The Cadillac was my staple, but I had Mercedes and 2 BMWs along the way, which was fun. I loved those automobiles. I had 3 excellent houses minus 3,500, 3,000, and 2,900 square feet on nice lots. My last house was 2,800 square feet on an acre of landscape ground, which was great. I joined many exclusive clubs in town, including a yacht club, which is the most exclusive and has strict restrictions. Traveled and accomplished everything well. We lived well. I was raised, and my wife died of a physical condition that wasn't her fault. Since childhood, this existed. 3 gorgeous daughters and a boy were raised by me as a single father. Years later, they're married and successful. We lived on top, not below. My kids and I always vacationed at top hotels and ate the best meals. Slumming was fun, although we did it occasionally. We were always authentic and never forgot ourselves. I couldn't have done it spiritually without Christianity. My belief system helped me through parenting 3 kids, establishing enterprises, and traveling. It became a little crazy late on. One time, I had to be in New York and Dallas in one day. Dallas, Texas is far from New York, and I left from the West Coast. I flew from the West Coast to Chicago at 12:30 a.m. and arrived at 6 o'clock. Then I arrived in Newark, New York, about 9:30 this morning. I was picked up, drove to New York City, had my business meeting, lunch, and returned to the airport. I flew from New York to Dallas at 6:30 or 7 o'clock, had a quick meeting at the airport, signed the necessary papers, and flew back to Seattle. After 24 hours, I circumnavigated America. That madness caught up to me. What put you in the hospital in the early 1990s? I bought a legitimate insurance firm, not an agency or brokerage. It was a national insurance subsidiary. I was swindled, I think everyone would say. They prepared their books and some representations. I survived the money, but several of their claims about their standing with legal insurance commissioners and other approval bodies were untrue. They didn't have what claimed. The item I wanted was unavailable. It was contentious, and we went to court and other places. We won, but we weren't winning enough to sell a product we could finish. I worked 80 hours a week on the purchase. My money was at stake. My health was deteriorating while I was distracted by the contentiousness. It wasn't the flu, but I felt I was getting it. I was much sicker. I was hospitalized with congestive heart failure. That doesn't imply the heart is bad. It just means that your body is so contaminated with your own fluids and that your body's systems are shutting down perceptibly to the point that you end up with a heart rate over 200, if you can picture that. I mean, the heart was about to explode, and blood pressure was 180 to 190. I neglected myself, which is what it was. No health precautions were taken. It involved stress and pressure. So I drove myself to a hospital, which was somewhat miraculous. They said they couldn't believe I had a car in the parking garage, but when they saw me, they admitted me to the hospital. I arrived at the hospital at 8:30. By 9:30, the physicians examined me and admitted me to the hospital's heart critical care intense unit. Honestly, I don't remember entering. I don't recall anything after they put me in a wheelchair and took me up an elevator. Materially, it's gone. Before I know it, I'm dead and going towards. I'm entering heaven. No death premonition in my reality. You'll be fine once you reach the hospital. Can you explain reaching the divine dimension? I'll try. I realized I was moving forward. It was a soft peachy color there, not what I expected. Moving made this fruit turn scarlet and pink. That gave me an amazing sensation of love and being cherished. It felt like condensing love and swimming in it. Wonderful. It astonished me. Wow, it was amazing. After thinking about that love, I realized I knew it from when I was in my mother's womb. Her and my affection combined. After pondering that, it was always referred to that point beyond that, where I brought my love emotion into her womb. That shows how strong love is. I entered an apricot color with the love feeling. As that apricot color engulfed me, I felt more secure, connected, and part of something bigger than ever before. The emotion of belonging was almost as strong as the love. It then changed to magenta. In love, purposefulness accompanied belonging and accomplishment. As lovely, loved, required, and sought as love, its purposefulness was tremendous. It turned silvery around me as I moved forward, with all these emotions still present and building. 3 familiar spiritual beings met me as I entered this silvery realm. They were having fun. I've experienced many out-of-body experiences, and every spiritual person that approached me had a gorgeous grin. They were like your best friend or sibling. Unlike the images of judgment and individuals looking down their nose at others, their love was unconditional, and they all smiled as if they were about to laugh. Can I ask about their physical or metaphysical presence and your current state? You had a body. Did these spiritual beings resemble humans? Yes, they resembled people. They seemed taller than me. I'm 6'3", and perhaps 8 feet. We didn't really see any of that as anything, but they did have like a togas on, like a modified toga, a modernized toga, if you want to call it that, and they were delightfully happy. They were delightfully happy to be with me, and they were having fun with me. They were saying, okay, well, you've been on your mission, you've been out there to do your thing. Now you've learned everything that we wanted and needed you to learn in the spirit, in the real world, in the material world, and now it's time for you to take those lessons and apply them for our spiritual purposes and the real purpose that you're there for. That seemed mysterious to me because 2 things I didn't want. 1, I didn't want to go back, and 2, I couldn't see how I could engage and make that seek from the high capitalist running around doing spiritual work and poverty work and things like that. That was something that was going to take. I was on a very fast train. I had lots of liabilities. My name was on leases. My name was on contracts, and I couldn't imagine how I could just stop. I really couldn't. I could imagine how I could stay dead because that was a very desirable thing at this point. As you can imagine, it would be desirable with all those wonderful emotions and feelings that are going through. They explained to me that one of the reasons things weren't going well at this time was because it was time in the material world for me to make the seek, so there was much happening to support what I was doing at that time, and the spirit was supporting it. The purpose of this transition to death actually was a wake-up call. I protested that the wake-up call was not going to be anything that I was interested in because I just wanted to stay in that environment where I was. Interestingly, I was going through a change. They were talking to me as if I'm somebody else. They're talking about experiences that I'd had in the material world, but they're also reminding me and showing me views of myself as a spiritual being, in other words, that being that I was before I was born into my mother's womb. That itself had a point to it, and I totally accept that because when I came as a young child, in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, there was so much that was totally foreign to me in this material world that I was very fortunate that I had a mother and father that truly loved me. But a lot of it didn't make sense, and then when it started making sense, the things that made it make sense were at a different level, a totally different level. In the material world, it was just amazing, and it does today still amaze me about that. So when they told me that I needed to be back to fulfill these things, and I suggested, well, I just couldn't imagine how I could do it because it'd be the equivalent of stepping off a train going 100 miles an hour. I just can't imagine how that would have worked. But they told me not to worry about it, that it would all be taken care of and that they're watching. Not with my consent. They moved me back into my body. Shortly after that, one of my daughters showed up at the hospital because none of this was programmed and people had been called and brought in. That moment ended my out-of-body experience, but that was only the very, very, very tip and the very beginning of hundreds of spiritual experiences. During our conversation, the nurse asks, "Did you feel like there were many people in your room?" I answered, "First, though, no idea. I don't know what's normal for 2 or 22 individuals." She responded, "Many people are coming in. Do you know why?" And I said, No, it's just a look at your wall." So I look at the wall. The wall is a white wall, hospital, right? What color can it be? It's either yellow or that Mickey Mouse caramel color, or white. In this case, it was white, but it's got a blue hue to it, okay? Blue like that color blue, all right? and I'm looking for something that's made the light blue, and it's me. The nurse tells me this. She says, "It's you. You're doing it. You're throwing this off." She then tells me stories that all nurses know aren't unusual, that it does happen, and that sometimes when people have an experience, that really does happen. And I said, "Oh, now I'm in trouble because they're bringing reality to this. This is delusion. Not even decent medications." I said, "Well, my heart's on fire." She said, "It is, but we know your heart's on fire because you can't make the blue if you don't have a heart on fire." All kinds of things happened after that. A few months later, I was in that hospital again, and one of my nurses was going past me. I was in for another procedure, not very recognizable. This kind of communication doesn't require death. You just need to be open to it. Whether it's a physical experience like mine in medicine or something else that creates spontaneity, it can happen to anyone. When you could go home and continue your life after activating this part of you, did the world appear that different? I walked away from it. That was it. I shut down everything and walked away from it. When I had explained that I didn't think, I was trying to convince the spiritual people that it wasn't going to be practical. They said, "Don't worry about it." So I didn't worry about it. I walked away. I got rid of all my business interests. When I say I got rid of them, I mean we just literally stopped. Other people took over, other people bought in, other people paid money, other people assumed some liabilities. But by the time we got through, we went bankrupt. We didn't go bankrupt, but I mean, comparatively speaking, we wiped out a lot of physical assets. And I woke up one morning and I didn't owe anybody anything. Now, that's equivalent of making about $3 million, really. So that was wonderful. And from that time forward, I had the ability to then be the spiritual person singularly and move along the trail that was being laid out before me. People were bringing me things to do. Their business world didn't get a telegram from Gardy. I mean, other people did, but generally, it didn't. And so lots of deals were being brought to me to do. Lots of things where I could have made the money back and made a lot more too. And all those kind of things. But I wouldn't have anything to do with them. In 1993, near-death experiences were researched but not discussed as much as they are today. Did you ever question the experience, given your rational, logical background in business? You ask whether I questioned my own experience. It was solid, real, and I had the validation of myself going through it. There was nothing I was involved with that was involved with the brain or emotional pattern. I was a sick person, and that killed me, but it didn't have anything to do with anything that would have generated a hallucination or anything like that. I had no predisposition to it. I'd lost my dad when I was 21, and in some sense, I was going to duplicate that experience for my children, and that was not a good thing to do, at least not for me. So I had no predisposition to be dead at all. Nothing. I mean, there's literally nothing that could point to that. It's a very interesting thing that happens. I'm a Christian, and I've attended a few churches and been on the finance committee. They always liked me to sit on their finance committee because the finance committee chairman is supposed to put in a few thousand just because he's chairman, stuff like that. But in real terms, no, we had no predisposition whatsoever towards it. The Christian part was a non-Catholic Christian, but a Christian still. And it was, so I had a Christ-centered environment. And I believe that I'd had miracles in my life to that point, more social miracles than physical miracles in the raising of the children. But there was something even more remarkable. When in that first night I was laying in that bed, there was a feminine spiritual presence with me, and this physical female was speaking intuitively to me in a voice that intuitively I could hear. And it was gorgeous. And I came to understand that that was somehow a representation of Mother Mary. This was a Catholic hospital, but it was awesome. It was comfort and joy and peace that I could never have manifested for a lot of reasons. Not being a Catholic is one of them at that time. Now, when I'm asking for an intercessory prayer, which I do from time to time, I will ask, in addition to some other people that I've got on the other side, I would ask Mother Mary to intercede for me. And to this day, I still believe that she not only was she there then, but she's been at least to that level once or twice more with me, where there was some manifestation of her actual voice. Amazing given that you turned your back on this life of luxury and businesses, a lifestyle that many entrepreneurs would give their right arm for. That really just shows to everyone, I think, the intensity of the experience and the fact that you're a good man because you went through the experience and decided to do the right thing. Like many people, they ran hard to make a lot of money. That's their obsession, if you want to call it that. The material world is everything, and that's their demon god for a while. And here I was going the other way, away from it. And to them, they just couldn't get their hands around it. Given a choice of a few $1 million in their pocket, or, not in going to church instead, they would take the money and run. So they were very confused about the whole issue, even though I'd explained it. But again, there were no conversations in society, and nobody understood the out-of-body experiences at those times. There was no literature that they could go get their hands on, and that was fine. I was delighted with it because I was gone. That was it. After I had the out-of-body experience, I didn't hang around and do things like that. The offices got closed, the offices got off the leases and just kept moving until it all got cleaned out. And they had a difficult time with it. For the first couple of 3 years, there were people that kept coming around. Come on, guy, let's get rich, some more, and yada yada. I made a lot of money for a lot of people, and myself included, but a lot of other people had also profited, and that was nice. But when they finally realized that I really wasn't going to do it, then that brought some of the people were a little bit bitter about it. They had, their motivation was greed. My motivation was spirituality. Two totally different things. Two completely different things. There's a very interesting writing that I did at that time, which is a very short piece, but just putting it down on paper so I wouldn't forget it, about how much the financial world just dominated these other people. They'd move on and do other things, but it was to the point. I had enough visibility in the world. I'd been featured in a lot of news publications and financial publications and stuff like that, and I dealt at the highest levels. So a lot of people knew who I was, but they weren't leaving me alone. So I finally decided I would just, go slow down my everything, and that I was helping unwind stuff, and I just went on the spiritual talk trail. I traveled up and down the United States West Coast and into Canada, and I eventually did that 7 or 8 months of lectures in London, the greater London area in the UK, up in Wales. And by the time I came back from the first one, we did another one. We did 2 of them. And I, over the years, have lectured up and down the coast here on the West Coast. People got the message that this was for real. It took 2 years, really, to hammer it, but the 3rd year is the one that we really needed to have happen. But then we quit hearing from them. Gordon, when you say we, were other people involved. At times, we had a small organization of about 30 some odd people here, and there and everywhere, unpaid volunteer staff. The goal wasn't to build a big organization. The goal was to be of service, put the word out, and convey not only my experience, but how that experience translates to the average person, and how that average person back into the spirit, and then people can experience true peace, pleasure, and contentment here, and let go. Love, compassion, goodness, and some Christian virtues form the foundation of this better existence. You're not out there to build up a cheek book. You're in heaven in a lot of the old-fashioned Christian teachings. They were teaching, I'm building my account in. Heaven is where I'm building castles. That's almost a selfish approach to spirituality, isn't it? That's how it was presented for a long time, and that's how a lot of people still perceive it. If I go over here and open the door for the little old lady, I'll get 0.5%. So the true charity of yourself is at least anonymous in the sense of the motivation. Obviously, you can't be totally anonymous. I've met with people who have carried that to a degree that was not very functional, and that they found ways to direct money to people through others and stuff like that, so they weren't showing anywhere. That is a form of being anonymous, but being anonymous isn't the overall criteria. The criteria is to get their need met. That's the number 1 criteria. The second criteria is that your motivation to get that person's need met is a motivation of simply help, love. It's a brother or sister help, like you would for a brother or sister. You're not going to ask the brother or sister that you did something for them. Now they've got to do something for you. Because when people give in that respect, it's more like an exchange, isn't it? I'll give you this in exchange for some positivity later on further down the road. But ultimately, the whole point is to give because you want to give and because you want to help that person, and there should be no other ulterior motive. Yes, and it's not even about that individual. You contribute because it's your mandate. I'm giving of myself freely, not for recompense, in my labor, commodities, or whatever I'm doing. I'm doing it because that's my core. I love being with Christ.